Well, we're going to start off with one of those colleges that I mentioned before, Montreat College. He is the president at Montreat College. His name is Dr. Paul Maurer. He is Montreat College, by the way, if you haven't heard of it, it might be one of the prettiest locations in the country. It's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? In North Carolina. I have no idea why he's here in Texas, because if I were there, I would never leave, right? It is literally an incredibly, incredibly beautiful location. But we're glad he came down for a couple days to be in ugly Dallas, Texas. He's been a leader in the nonprofit higher education administration for over 25 years. I think he started when you were like 8, right? So he's in his mid-30s. He earned his PhD in political science from Claremont Graduate University, his BA from the University of Cincinnati, which, by the way, I think you're from, right? Are you from Cincinnati? Yes. Does anybody know what Cincinnati means? The city of Seven Hills. It's good. I love it. We're there thinking for you today. I'm just telling you. And then he got his MDiv from Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. He and his wife have 4 children. He's going to be talking about cybersecurity, so pay attention, because you're going to need to know this. And after he's done, we're actually going to have a little panel discussion about these particular issues. Please welcome Dr. Paul Maurer.
Well, good morning. That was really lame. Good morning. Let's try that one more time. Good morning. It is great to be with you. And Dan, the reason I'm in Dallas is because you invited me. And I'm delighted to be here. And it's really great to be here at the BWI. I was here, I spoke in chapel at Prestonwood Christian Academy a couple years ago. And that led to a conversation Dan and I had about cybersecurity. And we were just talking a few minutes ago. And he reminded me that I said, you might consider doing something on cyber technology. And so the theme of this technology and humanity of this conference is really apropos. You've grown up as digital natives. You've grown up in a world where all you know is electronics. And that's different from previous generations. And so what I want to talk about this morning is cybersecurity. And just to give you a little bit of context, the college I work at, Montreat College in North Carolina, we're in our 8th year of teaching cybersecurity. We have an associate's degree, we have a bachelor's degree, we have a master's degree, an MBA with a cyber management concentration. We've gone from 0 to about 150 students in cybersecurity. And we have partnered with, if you see up on the screen, the SEALs there on the bottom right, the National Security Agency and Department of Homeland Security. We are one of their schools, so to speak. We're designated as a center of academic excellence by the National Security Agency and Department of Homeland Security. And we are actually like literally around the table with people at the NSA mapping out the strategy for how education institutions like Montreat do cyber education to help produce the workforce that the NSA and the nation need. I'm going to talk about the needs in the job market for cybersecurity in just a few minutes. But the NSA has asked us at Montreat College to develop curriculum for all 350 schools for the NSA across the country in professionalism and in ethics. Now, the ethics one is very interesting because as a Christ-centered institution, we have something to say about character and ethics. And a lot of schools that aren't Christ-centered institutions really have a hard time being able to say anything about character or ethics, and they don't do it, and they haven't done it for 5 decades. And so the NSA actually recognizes that as a Christ-centered institution, we have something to say about moral compass. And so they've asked us to write a book on cybersecurity, character, and ethics, which we'll be working on over the next year. But today what I want to do is I want to talk about the problem of cybersecurity and then how some things you might consider for your own life and for your own potential sense of calling and career. By show of hands, how many of you think you know what cybersecurity is? Just raise your hand. So I see so let me define cybersecurity for you. What is it? Cybersecurity is the practice of defending computers, servers, mobile devices, electronic systems, networks, and data from malicious attacks. It's also known as information technology security or electronic information security. That's what cybersecurity is. How big of a problem is cybersecurity? Well, we've seen breaches of major corporations happening on a routine basis. Yahoo, which most of you have probably never heard of, still stands as one of the greatest cyber breaches ever in the history of cyber breaches. They announced in 2016 that a breach had taken place 3 years earlier in 2013, and the people in Yahoo's network, which at that time totaled 3 billion people, all of their user accounts had been breached. So all the personal information, if you were a Yahoo user, was in the hands of the target. So Target or corporation got breached. That was one of the major breaches. Home Depot has seen a major breach. JP Morgan Chase, one of the major banks in America. These are all the high-profile ones. Sony Pictures, the insurance company, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. You also had the Office of Personnel Management in the United States government. 23 million federal employees' personal data was stolen by hackers. In 2016, the presidential election was interfered with by Russian hackers and other nation-state actors across the world. There have been breaches of the National Security Agency. The NSA is the agency in the federal government tasked with protecting our data, protecting the government data. And there was a breach called the WannaCry breach, and it was simply a deficiency of obsolete software that led to 230,000 computers across the world in 150 countries being breached. And it was simply an old version of Windows XP that led to the invasion. Equifax, one of the big credit reporting companies, in 2017, 147 million users had their data breached by hackers. Facebook, some of you are on Facebook, 50 million users had their personal information stolen from Facebook. Marriott International, the largest hotel chain in the world, had a breach in 2018. 500 million personal information accounts were breached. The breach began in 2014. It was discovered 4 years later in 2018. This is the norm in cyber breaches. They are big. They are often undetected for years at a time. And then another very big one, the biggest one in China most recently is Sina Weibo. This is China's version of Twitter, another 538 million accounts breached. But it's not just the big companies, it's also smaller companies. 67% of companies less than 1,000 employees have experienced a cyber attack. And another 58 have actually experienced a breach. Think of that. Over half of the companies surveyed had an actual breach of their data, companies under 1,000 people. It's a low barrier for entry for hackers. You've got nation-state hackers. There are whole economies in certain parts of the world that are built on cyber breaches. You've got individuals, the guy in the hoodie, in the basement. Yes, the next door neighbor can also be a hacker. It can be very, very sophisticated. It can be very unsophisticated. Literally, the 16-year-old down the street could be a hacker and a breacher, a bad hacker. By the way, the term hacker is a neutral term. There are good hackers and there are bad hackers. A hacker is just someone who knows how to get into a computer system. The question for a cyber professional is whether you're going to be a good hacker or a bad hacker. And that's what we do at Montreat, is we teach students to become hackers. We teach them how to be good hackers, ethical hackers. There are also hundreds of unreported smaller hacks that never get reported to law enforcement authorities or to anybody else. There's something called the insider threat. This is a really big deal, and there are three kinds of insider threat. One is the bad actor inside, the person at a company who's the insider and maliciously gives the data to someone or is bought by someone externally. But you also have accidental breaches that happen accidentally from someone inside or someone who's just negligent. And so between those three categories of inside reasons for a breach, about 60% of all breaches have an insider threat element to them. It's a really, really big number, and companies are really struggling. Governments and companies and nonprofits are really struggling with the insider threat of the problem. The problem is growing at a breathtaking pace. So the number of breaches reported in 2015, these are just reported breaches, was over 77,000 new breaches, unique breaches. By 2019, that number was 467,000, almost 500,000 breaches. The numbers are astoundingly large, and they're growing by astounding rates. The cost of cybercrime at a global level in 2017 was about $600 billion. That rose to an estimated $6 trillion for next year. There's also a shortage of cyber professionals. The bad guys are so far ahead of the good guys at a national and a global level that the ability to produce people for the workforce, the cybersecurity professionals, is badly falling behind. So right now, in the United States, there's about a shortage of about 500,000. There are 500,000 open positions in cybersecurity, unfilled posted positions in the United States alone. That's estimated to grow to about 1 million in the next 2 to 3 years. So this is what's called negative unemployment. So over the next probably 5 or 10 years, the number of cyber jobs will continue to grow, it's estimated, and the ability for colleges and universities and coding schools to keep up with it, right now the federal government is scrambling, and they know that they have to come up with better solutions and find more people for the workforce. This obviously is something that you might want to consider, and we can talk about that. There are a number of ways to think about entry into a cyber job. So there are academy or apprenticeship programs. We're actually just launching one at Montreat in January. These range from 2 months to 2 years, where you go a month at a time or 2 months at a time. You can go for a year, or you can go for 2 years, and what you're doing is you're not getting a college degree. You're not getting an associate's degree. You're not getting a bachelor's degree. What you're getting is industry certifications. So you're going to school part-time, you're working part-time, you're doing both in the same day, and by the end of a few months, you can actually gain entry-level cybersecurity certification. If you stay in the program for a year or two, you can get 4 or 5 certifications or 8 or 10 certifications, depending on how ambitious you are, how driven you are, how much you want. And these are very good paying entry-level salaries, even from an academy apprenticeship program. The associate's degree, of course, is the 2-year college degree. Your salary goes up if you have a degree beyond an apprenticeship program. That's also true of a bachelor's degree. The 4-year programs are growing. The number of 4-year programs in cyber are growing at a national level. And then, of course, you have master's degrees. And so compensation levels rise incrementally depending on your level of education. There are some schools like Montreat that offer all 4 of these as either entry-level points or as terminal degree points. Those cybersecurity jobs, what they're looking for, I will just tell you, what companies are looking for and the government's looking for is not just an education, but they want experience. So we have, for example, 2 internship requirements, 2 separate internships required for a bachelor's degree program at the college. If you're going to go into a cyber program somewhere, whether it's here in Texas or elsewhere, you're going to want to look at what experience that program is going to give you before you walk out the door with your bachelor's degree, because more and more the employers who you're going to be interviewing with are going to ask you what experience you have. They want it all. They want both the knowledge and the experience, because once you sit down in that chair, in that cyber lab, in that security operations center, in whatever center they have for you, they're going to expect you to solve problems right away. This is where your character and your education at PCA really matters, because your moral character matters and your vigilance matters. It matters to God, it matters to your family, it matters to your employer, it matters at a very, very broad level. So let me talk about vigilance first, and then let me talk a little bit more about character. So you've got to learn how to protect your own personal data. If you don't think cybersecurity is an issue for you, you're wrong. Cybersecurity is an issue for everybody. This is the economic and security threat of our age. It's changing the economy in which we live. It's changing the globe in which we live. Whole economies are being built on cybersecurity. Businesses are changing their budgets on cybersecurity. And if we don't adapt our own behavior, which I have, and I hope you have done to some degree, you will be the victim of either stolen identity or some sort of a personal breach. So some very, very simple tips for you include changing passwords to passphrases. When you're prompted to change your passwords, do it. Don't keep the same password, and don't use a simplistic password, and don't use the same password across all of your accounts. I actually keep a physical black book written down. I have it in a safe place at my home with all of my passwords across all of my platforms. And I'm changing passwords all the time, and I'm increasingly using passphrases. Some people will put, it's very, very hard for hackers to detect a space, particularly at the end of a passphrase, which you might consider including. And again, mix it up with, and most prompts now for passwords or passphrases require an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, some sort of a symbol. That's good, and you want to just take care. Be very, 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 very careful what personal information you post to social media, and that you put on your account at social media, and that you these social media platforms. I think we had a speaker, was it yesterday, on the social dilemma? That is a really sobering reality. You didn't show the social dilemma. If you have not seen the social dilemma, you need to watch that. That is must-see TV. And it is a very, very sobering reality that is your reality in the generation in which you live. Another tip is to make sure that you routinely update your software. So when you're prompted in your electronic devices to update your software, don't ignore them. Do them right away. And part of the reason for them, for those prompts, is because they're fixing problems, they're fixing bugs, they're plugging holes. Every software company is in a constant fight to make sure that their software cannot be breached. And so when you're prompted to update whatever software it is, do it, and do it in a timely way. And then, of course, as you may be aware, the single greatest point of entry and access is phishing emails. They have become very sophisticated, and they're looking more and more authentic. You've got to be very, very careful. Anytime that you receive any email at all that asks you to click a link, any phone call that you get that asks you to call back and you have no idea who it is, or it feels suspicious in any way at all, don't go there. Don't call them back. Don't click on the links. text you're getting, don't click on anything that you don't absolutely know for certain is from a trusted source, meaning a friend or a family member or a school official or someone you have absolutely no doubt. If the request seems odd in any way at all, if it raises any sort of a yellow flag, pay attention to the yellow flag. Don't ignore the warning sign. This is the number one way that the data gets stolen, is through these phishing emails. And so I get, I don't count them, but I get a lot every day, phishing emails. And we have an internal system at Montreat College where our own internal system sends out fake phishing emails to test our community, to test our faculty and staff. And so I get tested by my own IT department. And I will confess that about 2 weeks ago, I fell for one of the traps. It's the first time it's ever happened. I was so embarrassed. And I called the IT guy right away. I said, tell me this was one of the tests. Please tell me this is one of the tests. Because I clicked on the link. It looked so authentic. It was so well done. And I'm trained in this stuff, and I talk about this stuff, and I should never fall for this stuff, but I did. And so I would just say to you, your vigilance of your personal information is extremely important. Be very, very careful what you share about your private information with anybody. Your social security number, keep that private. Your birth date, keep that private. Your family members' names, keep that private. You've got to protect your privacy, because if you don't, nobody else will for you. And then finally, I just want to wrap up by saying there's absolutely nothing more important in your entire life than your walk with Christ. Your faith in Christ is the most important element of all of life. I'm a father of 4 children. They're all in their 20s now, so I'm an empty nester, which is pretty awesome. But I will tell you that I want my kids to go to college. I want my kids to get an education. I want my kids to be civil human beings. I want them to serve their community. I want them to get jobs. I want them to have families. I want them to get married. I want them to have children. I want them to be good citizens. I want them to get involved in their community. I want them to be thoughtful. I have a lot of desires for my kids, and your parents have a lot of desires for you, but there is nothing more important to me and my wife, nothing, than whether our children have faith in Christ. That's the most important goal that we have for our children, bar none. And I would say to you that your faith in Christ, your walk with the Lord, your communion with the Holy Trinity, creator of the universe, is the most important element of life, of your life. It's the most important decision you make, whether you will surrender and follow. And then everything else after that is a secondary decision. Who you marry is probably the second most important decision, most consequential decision you'll ever make. But what I want to say to you is that not only from a pastoral standpoint, from a life standpoint, from some old guy giving you advice standpoint, your faith matters. Your moral character matters. It matters to the Lord, most of all. It matters to your family and friends, but it also matters to your employer. So this all ties together. Don't think that your faith is separate from life. Don't think that your walk with Christ is separate from your job. There's been a great push in the last 5 decades in our culture to suggest that your faith is private and it shouldn't really impact the rest of your life. That's a false narrative. It's a false narrative, and no matter what sphere of life you go into. And so as you think about your calling, your sense of career, and whether or not there's a tech job out there for you, I will just tell you definitively that our relationship with the National Security Agency is because of our faith, not in spite of it. So when I started going to Washington, D.C. about 5 years ago to begin to build relationships with my U.S. senators, with the NSA, with the Secret Service, with a whole bunch of three-letter agencies, when I began to do that in 2016, and I hired a consultant and lobbyist to go with me to open these doors, I said to him, I just expect that we're just going to get kicked out of here. I just don't think that being a Christ-centered school in Washington, D.C. with some narrative about cybersecurity is going to work very well. And I thought it would close the doors. And what we have discovered is exactly the opposite. That what we thought would be our greatest obstacle actually was the thing that opened the doors in more places than we could have imagined. We did a series of roundtable discussions with high-level leaders in government, industry, education to test our value proposition. And here's our value proposition in cyber. That the problem of cybersecurity is not principally a technical problem. It's principally a human problem. And therefore, the solution to cybersecurity is not principally a technical solution. It is principally a human solution. If you don't have the right character and ethics, your technology doesn't matter very much. We held meetings, private, off the record, high-level meetings in Washington, D.C. for policymakers, in Charlotte, North Carolina for bankers and energy executives, and in Seattle, where there aren't a lot of mega churches like Prestonwood. There aren't a lot of churches, there aren't a lot of Christians. And in every one of those meetings, people who are not of the Christian faith agreed with our value proposition. So we have a very, very unique opportunity as Christians to go into the marketplace and to see that as a mission field for how we bring the goodness, the grace, the peace, the love, and the character of Christ into the marketplace.